The eldest sister was betrothed to the crown prince and would marry into the eastern palace upon reaching marriageable age. Yet after a bout of wind chill, she insisted on breaking off the engagement. Not only that, she even meddled in my marriage to the Prince of Jean. All that glitters must fade. The Pei clan's prestige had already reached its zenith. Hearing this, I knew my sister had also reincarnated. Even if I die, I will never marry into the Eastern Palace. The moment I opened my eyes, my eldest sister, Pei Chao, was threatening suicide to force the annulment of her engagement to the crown prince. The betrothal between my sister and the crown prince had been arranged 3 years prior. At that time, our father had already been granted the title of Duke of Dingwa, and had coincidentally performed a great service. With no further honors to bestow, His Majesty designated my 11-year-old sister as the crown prince's consort. She was to enter the Eastern Palace after her coming-of-age ceremony. As her twin sister, I was betrothed to the 5th prince, the crown prince's full brother. Last year, the 5th prince and the crown prince achieved great military success together, and he was just in theft as the Prince of Jean. Zhao, have you lost your mind? Your marriage to the crown prince was personally decreed by His Majesty. How dare you think you can simply break it off? Father scolded. What rises must fall. The Pei clan's glory has already reached its zenith. Facing father's scolding, my eldest sister remained remarkably composed. The next moment, she added, even the marriage between Shi and the Prince of Jean must be annulled. Hearing this, I knew my eldest sister had also been reborn. In our past lives, the fate of our Pei clan grew increasingly tragic. After my elder sister and I underwent the coming-of-age ceremony, she married into the Eastern Palace, becoming the crown princess. I, meanwhile, married into the Jean prince's mansion, becoming the Jean princess. We were twins, and the crown prince and Jean prince were brothers. Our marriages thus became a celebrated tale. Shortly after her marriage, my elder sister became pregnant. Yet that child ultimately failed to be born safely. When she was 5 months pregnant, the crown prince was attacked. To save him, my elder sister sacrificed herself, shielding him from the fatal blow. The fetus in her womb was lost as a result. After that, my elder sister remained deeply melancholy for a long time. For her sake, the crown prince dismissed all the concubines in his household. The world spoke of the deep affection between the crown prince and the crown princess. Even I believed it to be so. Later, my eldest sister became pregnant again. Having learned from her previous experience, she took great care this time. Even the empress exempted her from the daily court greetings. Yet, she still lost the child. The imperial physician said the previous miscarriage had damaged her body. Her constitution had not fully recovered, making it unsuitable for bearing children. People everywhere sought blessings through numerous offspring, and her husband was none other than the crown prince. Driven by necessity, the crown prince took several concubines. As heir to the throne, he could not remain childless. Yet he showed little affection toward these new wives, spending most nights in his elder sister's chambers. Even the first son born to consort Zhao Liang was registered under his elder sister's name. Ah Chao, he said, every child I have will be yours. Yet unless absolutely forced, what woman would willingly raise a child born to her husband and another? After the crown prince ascended the throne, my eldest sister naturally became empress. Zhao Liangdi, as the birth mother of the eldest imperial son, was granted the title of noble consort. But the eldest imperial son remained registered under my sister's name. Barring any unforeseen circumstances, he would become the crown prince. Back then, the new emperor often told my eldest sister, rather than the eldest prince, I longed to name our child as crown prince. So she drank those bitter, agonizing medicinal concoctions with all her might, all for the sake of bearing the new emperor a child. But no matter how many potions she consumed, her womb remained barren. Consumed by guilt, the eldest sister grew ever kinder toward the other consorts in the new emperor's harem. She truly treated them all equally, embodying the ideal of a mother to the realm. Yet it wasn't until the Pei clan's downfall that we learned the truth. The eldest sister could not conceive because the crown prince himself had fed her a potion to prevent pregnancy. 05. The assassination attempt that cost the eldest sister her first child was also orchestrated by the crown prince. During that period, my eldest sister took numerous tonics to nourish her body. The crown prince personally laced her restorative medicine with the infertility potion. Yet, unexpectedly, she conceived a second child. Tragically, due to the effects of the potion, that child was destined never to be born. Every imperial physician who had taken her pulse knew the truth. Yet not a single one dared reveal the truth to her. For from the very beginning, the fate of my eldest sister and the Pei clan had been sealed. The crown prince feared the threat of maternal relatives and did not wish the empress's family to grow too powerful. His marriage to my eldest sister as a consort was merely the first step in the Pei clan's downfall. And the Prince of Jin's marriage to me was simply adding fuel to the fire of the Pei clan's destruction. Father and mother both believed the eldest sister suffered from hysteria and confined her to her quarters. Father secretly sent envoys to summon a renowned physician from afar to treat her. But both the eldest sister and I knew clearly she did not suffer from any hysteria. She sought to save the Pei clan. So did I. Thus I went to see father and expressed my wish to annul the betrothal to the Prince of Jin. Father turned crimson with rage. After a long silence, he demanded bitterly, "Axie, what on earth has happened? Why are both you and Akeo clamoring to break the engagement?" I hesitated for a moment before whispering, "If the eldest sister marries into the Eastern Palace, she will lose 2 children in succession and be forced by the crown prince himself to take a potion that will render her barren. Once the crown prince ascends the throne, he will target the Pei clan first. Father would be falsely accused of plotting rebellion, dying unjustly in prison. Eldest sister would be banished to the cold palace, bullied daily until she died alone. My elder brother would be stabbed through the heart by his most trusted lieutenant, unaware of the betrayal. My younger brothers, refusing to believe father would rebel, would plead his innocence daily, refusing to confess. They would meet a fate worse than death. As for me," I paused before continuing slowly, "the Prince of Jin would use me. He'd plant evidence of father's alleged treason within the birthday gift I presented to him, making it the crucial piece to bring down the Pei clan." Father paled at these words. "Axie," he said, his voice slightly unnerved, "choose your words carefully." He instinctively stepped out of the study. Only after confirming no one was nearby did he close the door again. He stared at me and demanded, "Do you realize what you're saying?" I nodded. "I do. Because everything I've just told you, father, is what my eldest sister and I personally experienced. Not a single word is false. Now, my sister and I hold the upper hand. If we want the Crown Prince and Prince Jin to voluntarily call off the engagement, there are certainly ways to achieve that. But to protect the entire Pei clan, my sister and I alone are not enough. I need father's cooperation, because I don't merely wish to save the Pei clan. I also demand that the Crown Prince and Prince Jin pay with their blood for the blood they've spilled. Everything I told father happened in my previous life. The fate of the Pei clan was even more tragic than I described. After my eldest sister was banished to the cold palace, the emperor quickly took a new empress. Those within the palace are masters at flattery and betrayal. My elder sister was deposed, and the Pei family fell from power. In the days before her death, she was fed stale food daily and humiliated by palace maids and eunuchs. Though deposed, she had once been the emperor's first wife. Ordinary maids and eunuchs dared not mistreat her outright. But what if they had the new empress's approval? After the Pei family's downfall, Prince Jin did not take my life immediately. He confined me to a dark, windowless chamber, visiting every few days to recount the fates of the remaining Pei family members and my elder sister's current circumstances. Because he hated me. Before marrying me, Prince Jean had already chosen a woman he truly loved. Because of my existence, he could not marry his beloved with the proper rights of a principal consort. Instead, he was forced to put on a show with me, feigning deep affection. Back then, the Prince of Jean often said that every time he was intimate with me, he felt utterly sickened. He hated that I had taken the position of principal consort meant for his beloved, and he hated even more that the Pei clan had managed to cling to life for so long. Before he could even mourn his wife, the beauty had already married another. Thus, for the Prince of Jean, letting me die was actually a mercy. While he ordered torturers to torment me, he also commanded a female physician to tend to me meticulously. He even brought the remains of my brothers before me, describing in gruesome detail the scenes of their brutal deaths. Ever since my rebirth, the sight of my brothers' mangled corpses haunts me whenever I close my eyes. The Pei clan had always served the imperial house with unwavering loyalty. Why did they deserve such a fate? Simply because the realm bore the Li surname? Father lifted my eldest sister's confinement and assigned each of us a martial arts trained maid for personal service. My marriage to Ashu was an imperial decree. To annul it, the emperor himself must consent. Having regained her composure, my eldest sister finally realized how difficult it would be to dissolve the betrothal. Father said, even if the crown prince and Prince Jean commit grave offenses, the emperor would never lightly permit you to break the engagement. I blinked and asked, what if their crimes were truly unforgivable? For now, Father remains a powerful minister, and the emperor shows no intention of moving against him. The ones truly seeking to undermine the Pei family are the crown prince and the Prince of Jean. Should they commit a capital offense, the emperor would naturally cease forcing my elder sister and me to marry them. My elder sister seemed struck by a thought and said, she speaks wisely. Perhaps before we reach the age of coming of age, the crown prince and the Prince of Jean will no longer be in the court. Father sighed and cautioned, whatever you decide to do, you must always put yourselves first. I nodded and said, Father, there is one more matter I must ask your help with. Before he could inquire, I continued, the 9th prince, who grew up in the cold palace, is now 8 years old. I wish to ask you to find a way to draw the emperor's attention to him and become his tutor. The 9th prince's birth mother was merely an obscure palace maid. Once favored, she not only failed to rise higher but, for reasons unknown, angered the emperor and was banished to the cold palace. The 9th prince was born there. With his mother out of favor, even the emperor paid him no mind. Thus, the 9th prince endured a harsh life within the palace. In my previous life, my eldest sister and I once happened upon the 9th prince being bullied by other princes in the palace. Unable to bear it, we intervened and rescued him. Afterward, my eldest sister reported this to the crown prince. Seeking to win my elder sister's favor and project an image of benevolence, the crown prince began showing the 9th prince greater care. At the time, we had merely acted on impulse. Later, when the Pei family was falsely accused of treason, only the 9th prince believed in their innocence. He pleaded with the new emperor to thoroughly investigate the case and clear the Pei family's name. Yet he remained unaware that the entire scheme had been orchestrated by the new emperor himself. Ultimately, the 9th prince was denounced by the new emperor as disloyal and unfilial. He was stripped of his royal title, demoted to commoner status, and confined for life. When Prince Jean spoke of this matter to me, his words were laced with contempt for my elder sister and me. You two sisters are quite the schemers. He sneered. You've managed to bewitch this prince's 9th brother, leaving him utterly spellbound. Pity he can barely save himself now. Think he'll rescue the Pei clan? Prince Jean sneered. Pei Shi, you're dreaming. Though the path was winding, father succeeded in drawing the emperor's attention to the ninth prince, still confined in the cold palace. When father became the ninth prince's tutor, my elder sister and I were busy arranging a lake outing with the third daughter of General Qin's household. This Miss Qin, the third daughter, was the very person Prince Jean had never forgotten from his previous life. And the reason Prince Jean had fallen for Miss Qin was that, according to the original timeline, she would save him today after he accidentally fell into the water. Prince Jean declared they had already shared physical intimacy and that he was willing to take responsibility for Miss Qin. But Miss Qin wasn't interested. "Your Highness is already betrothed. Could it be you wish me to become your concubine?" Miss Qin wore an expression that seemed to say, "I saved you, and this is how you repay my kindness." Before entering the water, Miss Qin had no knowledge of the Prince of Jin's identity. Yet precisely because of this, the Prince of Jin grew ever more convinced of her noble character. After I was imprisoned by the Prince of Jin, he recounted their first encounter countless times. Perhaps men are simply masochistic by nature. The more unattainable something is, the more they desire it. And Miss Qin-san was precisely what Prince Jin could never possess. "Oh my! Someone's fallen into the water." A maid's startled cry suddenly echoed from the boat. Prince Jin had plunged into the water, just as he had in his previous life. Miss Qin-san instinctively rose to her feet, but I reached out and pulled her back. "Third miss. The one in the water is a man. If you rashly attempt to save him, you risk tarnishing your own reputation and even bringing shame upon your two married sisters." This time, I would not let third Miss Qin go to save the Prince of Jin. Nor would I save him myself. I wanted him dead. Third Miss Qin hesitated. Raised on the frontier since childhood, her nature differed greatly from the refined young ladies of the capital's aristocratic families. Persuading her to stand by and watch someone die would take more than a few words. Sure enough, after a moment's hesitation, third Miss Qin declared, "I cannot control the world's gossip. But I cannot stand by and watch a life vanish before my eyes simply because I fear what might happen." Hearing this, I suddenly understood why the Prince of Jin had been so obsessed with her in my past life. I smiled and said, "There are many ways to save someone. Why must Miss Qin-san personally enter the water?" With that, I gave the boatman a meaningful glance. The next moment, the boatman leaped into the water without hesitation, swimming toward the struggling Prince of Jin. This boatman, a master swimmer, was one of the Pei family. I wanted the Prince of Jin dead, but not yet. My reason for stopping Miss Qin-san was twofold. First, to make him suffer more. Second, to sever the chance for her to ever know him. Though in my past life, the Prince of Jin blamed me for failing to marry Miss Qin-san. She was a good person. In my past life, she never held the Prince of Jin in any regard. Miss Qin later married a young general. Judging by the Prince of Jin's disgraceful behavior, it's clear her marriage to that young general must have been deeply harmonious. The Prince of Jin is the one who caused my suffering. He is the one I seek revenge against. Miss Qin has nothing to do with it. Today, the Prince of Jin left the mansion alone. He came here for a secret rendezvous, and the person meeting with the Prince of Jin was none other than my personal maid, Chun Yao. In my previous life, it wasn't until the Pei clan's downfall that I learned Chun Yao had long since become the Prince of Jin's woman. In every sense of the word, the Prince of Jin promised Chun Yao that once his plans succeeded, he would take her as his concubine. Their affair had begun long before I married into the Prince of Jin's household. The Prince of Jin condescended to seduce my maid merely to use her as a pawn to secretly plant evidence of treason in my father's study. Later, when Chun Yao found access to the study impossible, she and the prince devised a scheme. Exploiting my trust in her, Chun Yao concealed the treasonous evidence within the congratulatory gift I prepared for my father. That gift, my father cherished deeply. The very day he received it, he ordered it placed in his study. Truth be told, Chen Yao was the crucial piece in the Prince of Jin and the Crown Prince's downfall of the Pei family. After my father's imprisonment, it was Chen Yao who stepped forward to accuse him of treason. Yet the Prince of Jin failed to honor his promise. After the deed was done, Chen Yao was silenced. I lifted my gaze toward the shore. After the boatman rescued Prince Jin, Chen Yao, hidden among the crowd, visibly exhaled in relief. I vaguely recall that on the day Prince Jin fell into the water in my previous life, Chen Yao also seemed to have taken leave from me. That's why I deliberately left Chen Yao behind when I left the mansion today, to take a gamble. Now, my gamble had paid off. The Prince of Jin had indeed come for a private meeting with Chen Yao. Only, some unforeseen mishap had caused him to fall into the water. As the boat drew near the shore, the boatman pulled the Prince of Jin to safety. My elder sister and I deliberately remained hidden. True to my expectations, Chen Yao rushed straight to the Prince of Jin. Only when Chen Yao helped him up and prepared to leave did I step ashore. In a tone laced with disbelief, I asked, Chen Yao, how did you end up here? Chen Yao had excused herself from me today, citing her younger brother's illness. Before she could react, I had already stated the excuse she had used. Before she could respond, my eldest sister exclaimed, isn't that His Highness the Prince of Jin? Chen Yan, the second young lady and His Highness the Prince of Jin are already betrothed. As the second young lady's maid, why would you avoid her and meet with His Highness the Prince of Jin? My eldest sister did not utter the word secret rendezvous, but the onlookers already began murmuring among themselves. Though our court imposes no strict gender segregation, Chen Yan, as my maid, should never have met secretly with my betrothed behind my back, regardless of her reasons. The same applies to the Prince of Jin. No man would secretly meet with his betrothed's maid behind her back. The Prince of Jin instinctively covered his face and said, Miss Pei has mistaken me for someone else. I am not the Prince of Jin. My eldest sister gave a cold laugh. I merely stated that His Highness the Prince of Jin is betrothed to the second young lady. I never revealed my identity. If you are not the Prince of Jin, how could you possibly know who I am? Overnight, rumors spread throughout the capital about the Prince of Jin secretly meeting his fiancée's maid behind her back. Word reached me that the Empress had summoned the Prince of Jin to the palace and severely reprimanded him. I personally delivered Chen Yan to the Prince of Jin's residence. I deliberately timed my arrival for when the prince returned, blocking him at the gate. Yesterday, this humble maiden acted rashly and caused trouble for your highness. I pushed Chen Yan forward before the prince and said, Chen Yan is this humble maiden's maid. That she has earned your highness's favor is truly her good fortune. Though this humble maiden is already betrothed to His Highness the Prince of Jin. As the saying goes, better to demolish 10 temples than to break a single marriage. Therefore, I have brought Chen Yao to the Prince of Jin's residence today. Whether she becomes a concubine or a bedchamber maid, this humble maiden shall raise no objection. With that, before they could react, I turned and leapt into my carriage, speeding away from the scene at breakneck pace. I'd see for myself how the Prince of Jin treated Chen Yao once she lost her usefulness. When the Empress sent word summoning me to the palace, my eldest sister and I were playing chess. Fingering the black stone in her hand, she chuckled softly. I've won. Before the palace maid arrived, my elder sister and I had been wagering on how the Prince of Jin would resolve Chen Yao's situation. She guessed he would ask Her Majesty the Empress to intervene. And indeed, events unfolded exactly as she predicted. Chen Yao was now in the Empress's palace. When I arrived, Chen Yao was still kneeling before the Empress, not daring to breathe a word. The Empress declared that the Prince of Jin's private meeting with Chen Yao was not due to any illicit affair. The Prince of Jin has long admired the second young lady, yet dared not meet her directly. Thus he devised this compromise, summoning Chen Yan to learn of your preferences. With that, the Empress drew a meticulously crafted golden hairpin from a brocaded box. This is the hairpin the Prince of Jin prepared for the second young lady. Rising, The Empress slowly pinned the hairpin into my bun. The Prince of Jin, knowing he had angered the second young lady, dared not present this gift personally. He entrusted this palace to deliver it on his behalf. I kept my head bowed, saying nothing. As if suddenly remembering Chun Yao, the Empress added, "As for that girl Chun Yao, the second young lady should take her back. The Prince of Jin harbors no romantic feelings toward her whatsoever." I feigned confusion. Could it be that this humble daughter has misunderstood? The Empress curved her lips. This was indeed a misunderstanding. Now that it has been cleared, second young lady, please do not hold any more resentment toward the Prince of Jin. This humble daughter dares not. I pretended modesty. It was this humble daughter who acted rashly. Spring Kite's return was, in truth, entirely within my expectations. Had she remained at the Prince of Jin's residence, it would have confirmed the rumors circulating outside. The Empress Dowager could never allow her son to bear such a disgraceful reputation, and keeping Spring Kite by my side served another purpose. I know you already belong to His Highness the Prince of Jin. Upon returning to the mansion, I confronted Spring Kite directly. Chen Yuan looked terrified and immediately knelt to beg for mercy. I looked down at her and said calmly, "When I sent you to the Prince of Jin's residence yesterday, it was to bring you two together. Yet I never expected His Highness to send you back. Mistress, this servant has erred." Chen Yuan wept and kowtowed incessantly. His Highness the Prince of Jin said he would take me as his concubine in the future. In exchange, I only need to occasionally share some matters concerning you and the Pei household with him. Chun Yao sobbed uncontrollably. I thought you would eventually marry into the Prince of Jin's household anyway, so sharing a few things about you with His Highness wouldn't matter. I feigned a look of deep concern and helped Chun Yen to her feet. Silly girl. With your beauty and all these years of service, I had always intended to elevate you as the Prince of Jin's concubine. Hearing this, Chun Yen froze in place. I gently wiped the blood from her forehead. Past grievances. I hold no grudge. Chun Yuan, as long as you serve me diligently, I shall ensure your wishes are fulfilled. Chun Yuan was pregnant, and it was the Prince of Jin's child. The news that the Prince of Jin had impregnated his fiancée's maid before his official marriage had even taken place quickly spread throughout the capital. By the time it reached the palace, scarcely anyone in the capital remained unaware. Word had it the Empress fainted from rage, while the Emperor and Prince Jin remained locked in the study for a long while. When Prince Jin left the palace, a faint trace of blood still marred his temple. His reputation was now utterly ruined. My eldest sister poured me a cup of tea. "But this means the Empress will surely come to hate you," she remarked. I smiled faintly. I never intended for her to like me anyway. After all, my sister and I planned to kill both her sons. Now that Chun Yen is carrying Prince Jin's child, we might as well use this opportunity to test the Emperor's intentions. I looked at my sister with some surprise. She continued, "Marriage isn't about making enemies. Given what Prince Jin has done, it's only natural we'd consider breaking off the engagement. If His Majesty relents, splendid. If not, we'll proceed with our plan." I couldn't help recalling those days imprisoned in the dark chamber of my past life. Very well. We shall follow my elder sister's counsel. In my previous life, Chun Yao had not been pregnant. Unexpectedly, keeping Chun Yao here has backfired in a way that creates an opportunity to break off the engagement. Father's merits are too numerous, and now they've given His Majesty a chance to balance his merits and demerits. Whether it succeeds or not, that rests with fate. Chun Yuan was carried into the Prince of Jin's residence, becoming his concubine. After berating my father, the Emperor finally agreed to dissolve my engagement to the Prince of Jin. On the day the engagement to Prince Jin was formally dissolved, I held my eldest sister close, tears of joy streaming down my face. No one knew how desperately I had wanted to break off that engagement. But now, It had become nearly impossible for my eldest sister to dissolve her engagement to the crown prince. 2 imperial princes, one after another, forced to break off their engagements. Even a fool would see something was amiss. So with the crown prince, we must be even more cautious. My eldest sister downed a cup of wine, exclaiming with satisfaction, "That's the spirit! That man has already entered the Eastern Palace and become a favorite of the crown prince," father said. My sister set down her cup, precisely because of this. We must be even more cautious. Yes, I agreed. After all, he was the heir apparent. The crown prince and the Prince of Jin had the emperor as their backing. To completely bring them down, we had to target the emperor himself. Driving a wedge between father and son is our first move. Throughout history, imperial families have never known true father-son bonds. For that throne, even brothers have been slaughtered. One's own son is no exception, especially with so many sons vying for the throne. Ever since my father became the 9th prince's tutor, the 9th prince gradually drew attention, particularly in his studies. He displayed remarkable talent. Lately, the emperor has frequently praised the 9th prince. Even the 9th prince's mother, the Empress Dowager, has gained prestige through her son. Not only has she been released from the cold palace, but she has also been granted the title of Consort Xian, a meteoric rise indeed. Now that the Prince of Jin has fallen from power, the emperor has begun to favor the 9th prince. In the crown prince's eyes, this is the emperor attempting to elevate the 9th prince to challenge him. The most evident proof of this was Consort Xian, who had risen from being a lowly palace maid without official status to the rank of consort. When people become anxious, they are prone to making mistakes. The crown prince was no exception. In an effort to suppress the 9th prince, the crown prince interceded on behalf of the Jin prince, who was still under house arrest. However, the emperor not only refused to relent but ordered the Jin prince to leave the capital and relocate to a provincial palace, forbidding him from returning without summons. The emperor's confinement of Prince Jin had always been a show for others. Soon enough, Prince Jin would return to court and resume his duties for the emperor. Yet now, before the assembled ministers, the crown prince had pleaded for Prince Jin's favor, even hinting that the emperor shouldn't have elevated the 9th prince's birth mother to consort merely because he favored him. Father spoke of this matter with great satisfaction. My eldest sister and I exchanged a glance. It seemed that even that cunning emperor from my past life, when his position was threatened, could become impatient and make mistakes. He didn't appear as formidable as I had imagined. With my brother's position under threat, it was only natural for his younger sibling to build his own power base, preparing for the future. I said meaningfully. My eldest sister understood, then let Rong-san go. I recall he's quite skilled in forging weapons. Father had devoted himself to teaching the 9th prince, and the 9th prince had never failed to meet his father's expectations. Yet the more outstanding he became, the more anxious the crown prince grew. His frequent private meetings with court officials had already drawn the emperor's displeasure. The empress, unable to sit idly by any longer, summoned my eldest sister. She wished for father to cease being the 9th prince's tutor. My eldest sister's face twisted with scorn. Before the empress summoned me, she said. The crown prince had already hinted at this several times to father, but father ignored him each time. That's why the empress took matters into her own hands and summoned you. I took up the thread. The empress doted on the Prince of Jin, and since I was the Prince of Jin's consort in my previous life, I naturally had frequent dealings with the empress. Thus, I could almost predict what the empress would say when she summoned my eldest sister today. My sister retorted sarcastically. I told her that the 9th prince has become a threat. Rather than letting someone else be his tutor, it's better to have father take the role. I will always be father's daughter. And what father wouldn't help his own daughter? I couldn't help but laugh. My eldest sister hadn't promised the empress anything. Yet upon hearing these words, the empress would surely interpret them as a declaration of support. She might even assume that father becoming the ninth prince's tutor was itself a ploy to win the ninth prince over to the crown prince's side. But neither mother nor son would ever know that it was my father who had arranged for the ninth prince and consort Xian to leave the cold palace. Following the original timeline, the emperor never once noticed the ninth prince until his own death. Now, by making my father the ninth prince's tutor, I sought to repay his trust in the Pei family from a past life, yet I also harbored some ulterior motives. But in return, the entire Pei family would spare no effort to propel him to that supreme position. After the Mid-Autumn Festival, floods ravaged Dingzhou, leaving the people displaced and suffering. The crown prince proposed sending Prince Jin to Dingzhou to oversee relief efforts, allowing him to atone through merit. The emperor agreed, commanding the imperial uncle to assist him. Concerned for the people, I never intended to set a trap for Prince Jin. Yet he brought this disaster upon himself. Rongsan's letter revealed Prince Jin diverted part of the relief funds to his private estate. Father spoke with grave solemnity. That villa, however, served as his secret armory. Ever since his expulsion from the capital, the Prince of Jin had harbored resentment toward the emperor. Influenced by Rongsan's deliberate manipulation, he became convinced the crown prince would eventually be deposed. Thus, within mere months, the Prince of Jin began raising a private army outside the capital, using banditry as a pretext. Both forging weapons and maintaining private troops required silver. Though the Prince of Jin was wealthy, he couldn't sustain such a large force indefinitely. Thus, he set his sights on the disaster relief funds. We must find a way to expose the Prince of Jin's embezzlement of disaster relief funds to the emperor, my eldest sister said. I nodded. As for the Prince of Jin secretly manufacturing weapons and maintaining private troops, it's not yet time to expose that. Though my eldest sister and I sought revenge, we never once considered using the lives of the people as a bargaining chip. If we disregarded the lives of tens of thousands of people for our personal vengeance, how would we differ from the Crown Prince and the Prince of Jin? I quietly left the capital to meet Chen Yao. The Prince of Jin never intended for a mere concubine to bear his eldest son. So after leaving the capital, the child in Chen Yao's womb was lost in an accident. Yet the prince dared not let Chen Yao die outright. At least not yet. When I found her, she was wearing coarse hemp garments, starching laundry in the courtyard. After so long apart, Chen Yao had aged considerably. Unable to kill her outright, the Prince of Jin found other ways to torment her. Though nominally his concubine, her life was worse than that of an ordinary maid. Now that the prince had gone to Dingzhou for disaster relief, Chen Yao's circumstances had improved slightly. Yet no matter how you looked at it, it couldn't compare to her life in the Pei household. She had once been my first-class maid. Not only had she never done manual labor, she had never even touched laundry or washing. When she saw me, tears welled up in Chen Yao's eyes almost instantly. She abruptly knelt before me, pleading, "Miss, I beg you, for the sake of our past bond, please save this servant, Chen Yuan." I called her name. "You were the one who wanted to become the Prince of Jin's concubine. I granted your wish. Why are you reneging now?" Chen Yuan's face was etched with regret. "Mistress, you don't understand. The Prince of Jin, he's not human." Chen Yuan wept with heart-wrenching anguish. Yet her fear was palpable. She dared not speak of the specific atrocities the Prince of Jin had committed. But what sort of man is the Prince of Jin? As his former consort, how could I not know? I lowered my eyes to look at Chen Yao and said, "You are now his concubine. Even if I wanted to save you, I am powerless to do so." Hearing this, Chen Yao seemed to glimpse a ray of hope. She hurriedly said, "Mistress, if I can leave this place, I am willing to do anything. Truly, anything?" Chen Yao gritted her teeth. "As long as I can leave alive, I'll walk through fire for you, miss. I won't hesitate. Chun Yao, the Prince of Jin's concubine, suddenly arrived in the capital to accuse the Prince of Jin of embezzling disaster relief funds. Chun Yuan had shouted her way all the way to the capital. By the time the emperor learned of this, most of the capital's populace already knew of the Prince of Jin's embezzlement of disaster relief funds. According to Chun Yan's testimony, shortly after the Prince of Jin left the capital, several boxes of silver were carried to his villa. That silver now remained stored within the villa. To prove the Prince of Jin had indeed embezzled disaster relief funds, Chun Yan had deliberately brought several ingots of official silver to the capital. The emperor was furious and ordered Chun Yan to be temporarily detained. Imperial guards were dispatched to search the Prince of Jin's villa, where they indeed discovered several chests of official relief silver. Within days, the Prince of Jin would be escorted back to the capital. Had second Miss Pei considered how she would face the counterattack from the Empress and Crown Prince? The speaker was the ninth prince. Hearing his address to the Prince of Jin, I suddenly realized something. With this thought, I tentatively said, "Your Highness, at a time like this, you shouldn't risk coming to see this humble servant." The ninth prince lifted his eyes to look at me. He was not yet 9 years old. Still shorter than me. The ninth prince continued, speaking for himself. If I were the crown prince, I would seize upon the fact that Chun Yao was once your maid and throw the blame onto the Pei family. I would claim the Pei family resented Prince Jin for allowing the second young Mrs. Maid to become pregnant and deliberately framed him. Given my father's temperament, even if he didn't believe it, he would surely overlook Prince Jin's transgression. What is your Highness's insight? I asked in a subdued voice. The ninth prince's lips curved slightly. What if the crown prince staged a coup before Prince Jin returned to the capital? The moment the ninth prince posed his first question, I realized he, like my eldest sister and myself, had been reborn. No wonder he excels so remarkably in this lifetime. My eldest sister sighed. Suddenly, I recalled how I had used him. Before leaving the Pei residence, the ninth prince said, I know second Miss Pei sought to use me to stir conflict between the crown prince and our father. Yet I care not. Second Miss merely seeks self-preservation. And I truly need the Pei family's support. After all, we share a common enemy. Thus, the ninth prince would cooperate with me to force the crown prince into rebellion before Prince Jin was escorted back to the capital. And he succeeded. The ninth prince used my father's spy within the crown prince's entourage to relay false intelligence. The crown prince believed it, actually leading the Prince of Jin's private troops into the palace in an attempted coup. The ninth prince earned credit for rescuing the emperor. The crown prince was arrested on the spot by the imperial guards. Those private troops were originally the Prince of Jin's. But the moment the crown prince deployed them, they became branded as his own. The weapons secretly stored in the Prince of Jin's villa were also uncovered by the imperial guards. This clearly shows that His Majesty's actions today were likely not a case of believing slander, but rather a premeditated plan. The emperor, observing the ninth prince who was wounded and still weak, immediately ordered the crown prince to be taken to the imperial prison for rigorous interrogation. Father spoke of the ninth prince's conduct in the palace with great delight. This time, the crown prince and the Prince of Jin surely have no chance of recovery. My eldest sister said solemnly, as long as they remain alive, we cannot afford to be careless. Father smiled and said, no emperor can tolerate his own son coveting his throne, especially when it involves a coup attempt. The crown prince and the Prince of Jin were guilty of treason. The evidence irrefutable. His Majesty ordered their execution. Yet he granted them a measure of dignity. He merely gave them poisoned wine instead of beheading them. As for the concubines and their mansions, they were all executed as well. The rest of the accomplices were all beheaded. And the betrothal between my eldest sister and the deposed crown prince was finally dissolved. On the day the deposed crown prince and the Prince of Jin were executed, my eldest sister got drunk in the mansion. Suddenly, I felt as if I were in a dream. Had the crown prince and Prince Jean truly perished? A high fever seized me. In my dream, I found myself back in that iron cage. Prince Jean ordered torturers to torment me while recounting his hatred for me and his lingering affection for Miss Chin-san. He believed that young general was unworthy of her. Pei Shi. If only you had died sooner. Prince Jean murmured, his voice thick with regret. Had you died sooner? Had the Pei clan fallen earlier? Would this prince have been forced to watch helplessly as the woman he cherished married another? The Prince of Jean hated me intensely. Enduring the physical agony, I laughed and said, as if you were worthy of marrying third Miss Jean? You dream. I spat the blood from my mouth onto the Prince of Jin's face. I watched him turn red with rage and shame. I had provoked him deliberately, and I had succeeded in freeing myself. Yet I did not awaken. In my dream, I witnessed the aftermath of my death. The Prince of Jean aided the new emperor in eliminating the Pei clan, but he himself became the emperor's greatest threat. For he and the new emperor were cut from the same cloth. Thus, while the emperor used him, he also feared him. I knew not how much time passed. The dream scenes kept jumping. The Prince of Jean died. By then, the new emperor had already infected him as the Prince of Jean. On the anniversary of my eldest sister's death, the new emperor had a private conversation with the Prince of Jean. And in the Prince of Jin's wine, the new emperor had placed poison. He didn't even bother with intricate schemes anymore, choosing instead a direct and effective method to take the Prince of Jin's life. In my dream, the new emperor held some affection for my eldest sister. Yet this affection paled in comparison to his desire for the throne. The Empress Dowager's family was immensely powerful. The new emperor knew better than anyone their activities outside the palace. Precisely because of this, he could not tolerate overly powerful imperial in-laws. I watched as the new emperor welcomed a woman bearing a resemblance to my eldest sister into the harem, making her his favored concubine. His feigned mourning for my sister made me want to vomit. When I awoke from unconsciousness, I felt utterly sick. My eldest sister was keeping vigil by my bedside, her face worn with exhaustion. Seeing me awake, she exclaimed anxiously, "Axie, you're finally conscious." Hearing her hoarse voice, I instinctively asked, "Sister, how long have I been asleep?" 7 full days. During those 7 days, much had transpired in the court. First, the emperor caught a cold, then fell gravely ill. The 9-year-old ninth prince was entrusted to oversee the state. In just a few short days, he earned the respect of the court officials. Even father was astonished by the ninth prince's remarkable performance. My sister and I unanimously decided to conceal from father the truth that the ninth prince was reborn. Barring any unforeseen circumstances, the ninth prince would most likely inherit the throne in the future. Once a person becomes emperor, it's hard to guarantee they won't change. As for secrets like this, the fewer people who know, the less danger there is. Father's future role as imperial tutor would suffice to safeguard the entire Pei clan. As for my elder sister and me, merely avenging the wrongs of our past life was already a blessing beyond measure. We dared not covet more. Under the guise of praying for the emperor's well-being, my sister and I established a Buddhist shrine at home, taking up monastic vows while retaining our hair. Father, aware of our intentions, made no demands. Having learned from the lessons of our previous existence, we dared not trust anyone lightly. Better to seize this chance to practice Buddhism while keeping our hair. Should the emperor later recall the deposed crown prince and Prince Jean, at least he won't take it out on us. Besides, this so-called practice is merely for show, for others to see. Half a month later, the emperor finally began to show signs of recovery. Upon hearing of my sister and my heroic deed, the emperor fell silent for a long time before praising my father for raising 2 fine daughters. Upon his recovery, before the ministers could speak, the emperor proclaimed the ninth prince as crown prince, holding my hot water bottle. I suddenly thought of Chun Yao. She had indeed left the Prince of Jin's villa alive. But after the dust settled on the case of the deposed crown prince and the Prince of Jin's treason, she vanished forever within the prison walls. From the moment she resolved to expose Prince Jin's corruption, her death was sealed. Yet she had allowed herself to be blinded by that sliver of so-called hope. From the very beginning, I never intended to let her live. In my past life, had she not concealed the evidence of my father's treason within the congratulatory gifts, the Pei clan would never have met such a fate. Neither I nor the Pei family ever treated her poorly. Yet she still chose without hesitation to aid Prince Jin in destroying the Pei clan. All for the paltry position of a concubine. How laughable. After the 9th prince was named crown prince, my eldest sister and I left the capital under the pretext of spiritual cultivation. In my previous life, we were trapped in the capital until our deaths. Now we wish to venture out and see the world. Father, uneasy, specially selected several skilled maidservants to accompany us. Along the way, my eldest sister couldn't help but exclaim, "The world beyond the capital is so vast." I took a sip of water, surveying the towering mountains and flowing streams around us. I'd heard that in the south, spring lasts all year round, even in winter. Flowers bloom. My eldest sister smiled and said, "Then let's journey southward to see these winter blooms." "All right," I replied. I too wished to see what that place, existing only in storybooks, truly looked like. Fortunately, we had ample time to explore slowly. Most importantly, the deputy general who stabbed my elder brother to death in our past life now resides in the south. In our past life, he killed my brother while following orders. But I cannot rest easy knowing such a man remains near my brother. Thus, my journey south serves not only to observe the local customs but also to eliminate this threat. I will not take his life, nor will I cause him hardship. I merely intend to meet with my brother, who commands the southern garrison, and remind him not to appoint that man as his second in command. That alone shall suffice. The end.